Recording in progress.
Hi Heath, thank you so much for helping with my project. Let's see, I know you're into space law, and I'm sure your interest in space is much deeper than just that. I was wondering if you could say a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I am currently a second-year law student at the University of Mississippi with a concentration in air and space law. I'm originally from Georgia, where I went to undergrad at Georgia College and State University, where I graduated with history and poli-sci. I originally wanted to do astrophysics, but it turns out that is hard and I'm bad at math. So I had to do something that still incorporated space. And my parents always said I'd make a good lawyer because of how much I love to argue. And then I found out space law was a thing and I found out Ole Miss is the best for it. And here I am.
That's awesome. But I guess in terms of your interest in space, are you able to trace that back to an event or an experience or a person?
Yeah, I would say that actually probably started when I was very, very, very little, and my parents put these glow-in-the-dark stars and planets on the ceiling in my room, and I would just stay up like way too long and just stare at my ceiling growing up. And then I've just had a fascination with space since then. And I did all I could to research it. Every birthday I'd ask for a telescope. I had the opportunity to meet Neil deGrasse Tyson. I read as much as I can about space. It's just a passion of mine that permeates basically everything I do.
That's interesting. Well, I think those glow in the dark stars sell well, so hopefully it inspires many others along the same lines.
Let's hope.
So I guess this may be a wasted question, but a good place to start. Did you know that NASA's planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
I am. I have been following the Artemis program very closely, and I am beyond excited. I only wish they had started sooner.
Would it surprise you that most of the people I talk to, like at Starbucks, on the street, have no clue that we're going back to the moon?
Yeah, I think there's been a very big disconnect in the recent decades about just the space exploration program in general. I think there's not enough hype around it. I don't think enough people are aware about it because there just hasn't been that much interest, I think, in the space industry for most of the public. So when people say that they don't care, they have no idea, I think that shows a big issue that we have because space exploration is one of the greatest fields that we have, and it's responsible for so many technologies that we enjoy today in everyday life. And I think more people need to be excited about it.
I guess, why do you think they're not excited or knowledgeable about it?
I just feel like it's been pushed on the back burner. If you were growing up in like the 60s and 70s and you hear about these humans stepping foot on a moon, on our moon, it can't help but excite you. But after the Apollo program ended and we started focusing on things like the ISS or the Mars rovers, I think there was just gradually a disconnect from the public because people didn't really see themselves doing that, and there just wasn't really cause for celebration for most people because we're like, oh, we already went to the moon, that's fine, that doesn't seem as important.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You mentioned that they don't see themselves doing that. Do you think that's changed any? Do you think people see themselves actually someday going to space today?
Absolutely. Especially just with how big the exponential growth for the commercial space industry has been in the past decade alone, because now we have commercial companies that are sending everyday people to space for, even though it's just a few minutes at a time, they are having that opportunity to do something that only a few hundred people in the history of our planet have ever been able to do. And I think now is the time that people are starting to become excited again, because it's becoming available for people that aren't just extremely talented and skilled fighter pilots that are now in the astronaut program. I think it's becoming more just available for everyone, and I think that is amazing.
And I mean, there's definitely a good point to that. I mean, we're about to have our second private Axiom mission
Mhm.
to the International Space Station. We had Inspiration 4 about a couple of years ago. And then Dear Moon's exciting. Um, I I was wondering what you think might happen first, Dear Moon or Artemis 2?
um I'm gonna go and say Artemis 2.
Yeah, I mean, they actually have an entire built capsule already, as opposed to just the rocket part of the spacecraft. So,
Right.
um, when you think about space law, I guess where do you see the real focus of like activity at this point in time?
Mhm. I think one of the biggest things that space law is focusing on right now, or should focus on at least, is space debris mitigation. With the amount of satellites and microsatellite and satellite constellations that are being launched into low Earth orbit or beyond by these commercial companies, it is becoming a much more packed area that's causing there to be shorter and shorter windows of opportunity for launches. If you look at Starlink, they have thousands of satellites there already. And if they, once they start continuing to launch thousands upon thousands of more satellites, the launch windows are going to get increasingly smaller. And if they break up or if some malfunction happens, then it's just floating pieces of metal that only serve to hinder the launch of others. It could potentially damage other crafts, such as satellites or even manned missions that could be damaged in some way.
Yeah, it's a big problem. I think it's really hard for people to understand space debris. I know that sometimes people might think of it like cleaning up the side of the highway, but it's more like trying to clean up the bullets in the battlefield as the battle is happening.
Precisely. Yeah.
So, do you see any positive movement on that?
I know that Astroscale is making pretty good headway in their mission of space debris mitigation. I think there needs to be currently more than just push for legislators as to mitigate space debris. I think there needs to be active debris removal practices that should be put in effect or should be researched, because if we only continue to push legislation that says minimize as much as possible, you're still adding to the problem. You're only making it more long term.
Yeah, it is really kind of funny to think about. 70 years ago, this problem was non-existent. I mean,
Absolutely.
uh, I guess that's probably true with everything internet related as well. But
Yeah.
uh, when you think about the future of humanity, say 200 years out, what does it look like to you?
Well, I am a very idealistic person. I think that's one of my biggest strengths and weaknesses at the same time. I really hope, I want to believe that in 200 years, I think a lot of the squabbles that we currently have on Earth and a lot of issues that we have will seem so childish in nature. I think within 200 years, we'll have settlements on Titan and on Pluto and on Europa and just spread throughout the entire solar system. And I think a lot of the problems we have today will seem infinitesimally uh, minute and insignificant compared to just the idea of becoming a spacefaring species.
Um, I talk to a lot of people who see the end of the world happening before 200 years from now. I was wondering if you've ran across any people that have a less idealistic future.
Oh yeah, very much so. I've come across a lot of people like that. And it's disappointing to hear that, because I think we have such an amazing opportunity to uh really, I think space is the perfect field to, it's a unifying field. I think a lot of people don't realize that when you look at the ISS, the astronauts from Russia and America, they're like best friends up there because they have a job to do and they want to do it right. So they work together no matter what's happening down on Earth, what politics, what conflicts, they simply put that aside in order to work for a common goal. And I think that is a brilliant example of how space can unify people. But in terms of, an apocalypse of some sort or anything like that, I think we will be able to push through it. I don't think there will be like a nuclear Armageddon or anything like that.
Well, I was talking about nuclear Armageddon. I was listening to a book, I forget which one, but it was talking about, I think it was Atomic Habits. And it was talking about how one of the challenges we have in nuclear weapons is that you have a person, like the president of the United States, in a completely safe and secure spot, pressing a button to launch nuclear weapons, which is going to be horrific, but they don't actually see any of the implications or the results of that horrific thing. And apparently somebody in the early 1980s or late 1970s proposed that instead of having the codes like carried around in a briefcase, they should be like inserted in the chest of one of his people surgically, and he would actually have to kill them to get them out.
Mhm.
People are like, that's so horrific, but that's the whole point of it. I
Right.
just wonder what your thoughts were on that
Yeah,
proposal.
I think obviously it's not just so simple as the president, just going downstairs and pushing a button. There's plenty of safeguards and fail safes, but I think any sitting president needs to know the ramifications of what they are doing, and if if having the codes surgically implanted in someone will let them know that this is like not even a drop of water in the ocean of horror that you're about to unleash. I think I'm not saying I'm for it, but I think it's a very interesting thought that should show the ramifications of what they're doing.
And as we have more and more weapons where the people operating the weapons are so distant from the destruction. I mean,
Mhm.
like World War I, you're like right there in the trenches. You're seeing the effect of all your actions and
Mhm.
inactions. But World War II, where you're kind of dropping bombs from a distance, you have a little bit more idea, but less so. And
Right.
then like now with like drone warfare and guided missiles and stuff, it's all very, very theoretical about the
Yeah.
damage that's being done. Hmm. Um, well, uh, why do you think, I mean, I guess first of all, do you think it's a new thing that there are people who see the end of the world, or is it basically a phenomenon that's we've always had? I mean, do you feel like there's been some change in?
Well, I mean, I think there's always been people like this, but it's definitely grown in recent years. I mean, you look back to the Red Scare during the Cold War, that people thought that there would be a nuclear Armageddon the next day. Like people were terrified. They were building bunkers in their backyards. But I think with just how much social media is able to reach to virtually everyone on the planet today, people can see any information they want to hear or see that confirms what they think, or they can be introduced to information by people that have no idea what they're talking about, which is why I think like conspiracies are so rampant today. And I think just with this huge explosion of information that's reaching everybody, I think there's very little to stop people from like thinking about alternatives. They just see something and like latch onto it and say, yep, that's what's going to happen right there. We're doomed.
Hmm. It's also kind of interesting. You mentioned that people thought about nuclear Armageddon and built bunkers. So I mean that tells me that they were like, well, the world might end, but I'm not going to. There's hope for
Mhm.
me. I I really don't see anybody today like building the equivalent of bunkers. It's just like they just kind of seem more accepting. Like, well, I guess better enjoy it while we can.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. There's when I look whenever I'm online and I see comments over videos, like I saw one comment that said like, "Who are y'all supporting for president?" I'm supporting the Meteor 2024. Let's go, because they just
Wow.
don't really care. They're just like, I'm ready to be taken out. This world sucks, and that's definitely a concerning thought.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, if you think through a little bit more, it's almost like self-fulfilling, right? If you don't believe in
Mm,
a future, why invest in things that have payoff, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years from now? If you
right.
do believe in a positive future, those investments make sense. And obviously, not doing one versus doing the other actually creates it more likely that there is a future, So it's just like it's not it, having that opinion, um, about having opinions on the future of humanity is not just an academic thing. It actually
Mhm.
feeds into the future of humanity. It's kind of difficult.
Yeah, no, that's. I think you hit the nail on the head on that one. I 100% agree.
So I guess, um, how could people like you and I, actually go and change those public perceptions?
I think with the Artemis missions coming up, I think that's probably the greatest event happening in our near future that will set fire to people's imagination again, set fire to the passion and hope that like we're better than what we're squabbling about. Our future's out there. It's like let's get our stuff done here and make it better for everyone and head out there. And I think information sharing and just spreading the word is probably the biggest thing we can do right now. There's the only way to get people excited is to share with them exciting news. So going out there and telling people like it's happening. We're in the process of becoming a interplanetary species right now. And if that doesn't excite you, go see a shrink because that's insane. This is incredible stuff.
Uh, Now, Starship, next week is supposed to be its test flight.
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
I think it's going to be a roaring success. I think Starship is such an incredible mission, and uh, all the people involved in that deserve so much praise and gratitude because they are creating something that no one's ever done before. And the fact that it's a commercial company should galvanize the rest of the industry to be like, hey, it's not the government that's doing it. It's like really us. It's the person on the ground. It's the common person. I think Starship is incredible, and I cannot wait to congratulate its success.
How long do you think it'll be before you take a flight on Starship?
Um, well, if they offered, I would go tomorrow. But with my schooling currently and lack of financial stability in order to do that, it's going to be a little while before I can do it on my own accord.
Um, in 200 years, how do you think the legal landscape will be different?
Oh, it's going to be entirely different. It's going to be entirely revamped, I think, by that time, because today, with the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, no one is allowed to own property in outer space. So even though we have flags on the moon, that doesn't mean we own any part of the moon. It's just a declaration that we went there. And by in 200 years, and at that point, I believe we will have settlements across the entire solar system. That's going to have to be looked at with a much greater detail in terms of resource mining and territorial claims with different companies at that point, which I'm sure will want to set up factories or businesses of some kind on these celestial bodies. The current framework of space law is going to go through some major changes by that point.
And just thinking about human rights, you know, if you look at The Expanse, Total Recall,
Yeah.
you see like people being oppressed. And if you think back to our history of taking people from one part in the world and putting them in like labor camps and
Yeah.
kind of mining towns and stuff where they're like completely cut off from the rest of society and you have nothing but like the company facilities. It seems like being able to control somebody's like air supply is like the ultimate version of that. How do we like develop these settlements without having a person or a group of people having like total control over another group of people?
That's a great question, and we're still trying to figure out that answer. So the first ones that make it to these other planets or celestial bodies, they have the capacity to set their own rules, which is why it's so important to educate everyone about human rights today and how we can try and prevent that as soon as we start taking these steps to other bodies and planets immediately. So we set up these clearly defined rules and legislation that hopefully prevents that. Someone that I work with or have worked with is AJ Link, and he has some great thoughts about this and some great pieces of writing about human rights in outer space.
And you mentioned you would take a ride on Starship tomorrow, if you could. How far would you consider venturing out into space? Would you consider just orbit, going to the moon? If there's a Mars colony that says, a space lawyer needed, please apply. Do you see yourself immigrating to Mars? Like, how far do you see you going?
I mean, from the comfort of my own apartment, I would say that I would go anywhere, but it's very hard to say if I was legitimately faced with that decision, if I would actually go through with it. I know for a fact I would orbit the Earth just in a heartbeat, absolutely. The moon, if it was coming back, sure. Mars, one-way trip, I don't know. I know my mother would be very angry with me, but it's something that you'd make history without a doubt. You'd be remembered for all time, and that's a very interesting thought to me.
Well, Heath, I know we covered a lot of topics, and that's pretty much all the questions I had. But is there something that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
The topics I was thinking about going over have also already been discussed, really. Yeah, we talked about Starship, Artemis. I think one of the greatest things that involved with Artemis specifically are the Artemis Accords. I think these countries that are joining at a much faster pace than they did for the moon agreements was really indicative of how the space industry is evolving and why space exploration is so important.
One thing we didn't talk about was AI. And I don't know. I mean, have you had any experience with Chat GPT?
Not personally, but I've seen videos over it.
I recommend getting an account. And I would recommend typing in some of your prompts you get from school into it and see what comes out. I was playing around with it the other day. I'm like, please create a rental agreement, with these terms, and it spits out like a contract that looks pretty amazing. I mean, it's just like its ability to process human language and thought is, I mean, it'd be like having an office full of legal assistants helping you out with your
Right.
job, all available on demand for free 24/7 and doesn't forget anything.
Yeah. That's definitely going to be a interesting field that's going to continue to evolve and develop, especially when it comes to things like intellectual property. If an AI creates something, who owns it? Is it the AI itself? Is it the person who programmed the AI? Is it the person that set the prompt for the AI to build something or create something? So as that continues to evolve and develop, the legal landscape surrounding it will also continue to evolve.
Well, I mean, that's a very interesting question. And since you proposed it, how would you go about sorting out those issues?
I personally have no idea. That it's a field that is pretty new in terms of what it can do today, and the legal landscape around it just hasn't really caught up to it. I think it's progressing far faster than legislation can be created around it.
Some people are looking at this type of AI as being a great way uh, to educate people. And essentially students would have one-on-one teacher access
Yeah.
via, like a chat GBT type thing. Um, and I was kind of carrying that to extreme. If you could think about how the AI could actually mold like the population of humanity as it's moving forward based upon what it teaches and how it responds and what it does. It's kind of scary, I think.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Hopefully at this point, with just how many pieces of media we've seen where AI takes over, like Skynet, I think we should be able to avoid something like that. Hopefully, I think it's going to be, to say the very least, groundbreaking to see how this continues and just what all the uses for AI there will be in the near future.
Yeah, I was just thinking AI, since we probably go through it to find movies like that, those
Mm.
movies get harder and harder to find.
Yeah,
Before long, this idea of AI taking over goes from being, like the scary thing to like this great thing that we look forward to.
right.
It's just well, Heath, I really appreciate your time, and um, uh, it was a pleasure to get to talk to you and kind of get your thoughts on the future of humanity and the importance of us going back to the moon.
The pleasure was mine as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Well, I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.